lot of people don't realize what's really going on. They view life as a bunch of unconnected incidents and things. They don't realize that there's this, like, lattice of coincidence that lays on top of everything. I'll give you an example, show you what I mean. Suppose you're thinking about a plate of shrimp. Suddenly somebody will say, like, plate or shrimp or plate of shrimp, out of the blue, no explanation. No point in looking for one either. It's all part of a cosmic unconsciousness.
You eat a lot of acid, Miller, back in the hippie days?
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi or cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, your existential Mr. Rogers. That is correct, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you from this, the Robservatory, on a very hot Friday afternoon in September. It's going to get hotter, ladies and gentlemen. It's supposed to get up to 111 degrees here in the Southland this weekend. Fun, fun, fun. So you're probably asking yourselves, why did I choose to start this episode out with a clip from Alex Cox's seminal 1984 punk rock sci-fi repo code masterpiece, Repo Man? Well, I've always loved that Laurie Walter quote when he's talking to, of course, Otto, played by Emilio Estevez. Alex Cox directed that film. The idea about the cosmic consciousness, shrimp or plate of shrimp. It's one of those exchanges that, you know, I think everybody in the world who likes movies has certain dialogue exchanges that they're just burned into your mind. And they pop up occasionally. And you never forget them because they're true. They're truisms. And Laurie Walter, the actor who's playing that role, Miller, so the idea that out of the blue, you know, somebody, friend of yours, or you might hear a phrase or you'll read it in a book, something, and then suddenly, like, that person or that thing or whatever the concept is keeps popping up. You don't know why. It just happens. That's the cosmic consciousness or unconsciousness, however you want to call it. So I have a very good friend, David Starzyk. I met him at Full Moon back in 1993. We've been friends ever since. His wife is a good friend of mine as well. She played Talera in the Vulcan scene that I did for Axanar, Kim Fitzgerald. And they're two of my favorite people. Well, I was talking to David earlier this week, and he said to me something about, he was talking about Ann Sarnoff, who he went to elementary school or junior high with, grew up with. And I was like the head of Warner Brothers, the CEO of Warner Brothers? He goes, yeah. You know, I grew up with her, you know, and so we've known each other. Now, then today in the Hollywood Reporter, an interview with her popped up. Now, I have to say that I've always been interested in the business of Hollywood. And growing up, learning about the moguls, people like, you know, Jack Warner or Louis B. Mayer, I really was fascinated by how power in Hollywood worked and how do you run a movie studio. And I loved movies that had depictions of these people. Like in Mommy Dearest, you know, in Mommy Dearest, you get to see studio heads and the way that they act. And then when I got my job as a management trainee at Warner Brothers, my first ongoing industry job, and I was working for the senior vice president of physical production, what that allowed me to do was wander around the halls of Warner Brothers. I mean, literally my job, for the most part, was delivering call sheets and production reports on all the films that Warner Brothers were making. So I was in and out of all of the heads of Warner Brothers, the offices there. And I knew all the assistants and, of course, lots of things. I mean, I was constantly, there was stuff going on all the time. So I was literally in and out of the halls of power all day long on a daily basis, for a couple of years at Warner Brothers. And it was very interesting. I learned a great deal. And I stayed after work all the time, and I would hang out with the other senior vice presidents and have conversations with them. Someone like Lisa Henson was hugely influential to me growing up, because she always gave me the time of day. I'd go to her office, and we would talk about stuff every day. So I've always been fascinated by the regimes that run studios, and Warner Brothers in particular, because I worked there and because I was able to see, and admittedly, I was just a management trainee. I was a peon. Nobody paid any attention. However, I was able to pay attention to what was going on, and if you kept your nose clean and your nose to the ground, there was all kinds of things that were happening. The assistants' desks, I learned to read backwards and upside down so you could see. I read everything. I was like a sponge, and it was amazing. And it wasn't because I was interested in telling anyone else this information. It was only for me. It was only for my own my own edification. But still, I've always considered Warner Brothers my home studio. I've never it was fun for me when we made Hills Run Red, because I was able to go back to Warner Brothers, and it was sort of a dream. I know it was a direct-to-video Warner Premiere title, but it was really cool when we went and met with Diane Nelson and Matt Bierman when Diane Nelson was president of Warner Premiere, and I was able to go back to Warner Brothers, and it was the only time I've ever taken anything to Warner Brothers to make, and rolled in there, and we pitched it, and 2 weeks later, we were greenlit. So not only did I work at Warner Brothers for the senior vice president of production, physical production, the one time I ever took another movie back to Warner Brothers, it got greenlit. Now, would I like to make a theatrically released feature? Yes, I would love to do that. But going back to Warner Brothers, I've always loved Warner Brothers. It's got the big back lot, and it's still, as far as old Hollywood goes, the Paramount's there, and you still have the lot over at Sony, but Warner Brothers has been Warner Brothers. And when I was there, by the way, it was not bifurcated yet. It was the Burbank Studios. It became the Warner lot while I was there. So it was fun. But one of the things that has always fascinated me is the halls of power at Warner Brothers. Who's in charge of what? And it's just one of those things that I always keep track of. Well, so when my friend David Starzyk mentioned Ann Sarnoff, I was like, that was very interesting. Now, for those of you who don't know who Ann Sarnoff is actually the CEO of Warner Brothers. She's the chairperson and CEO of Warner Brothers, and she is the first woman to hold the position. And one of the things that, when I was at Warner Brothers, it wasn't just, Lucy Fisher was a senior vice president at Warner Brothers. Alan Stewart was a senior vice president at Warner Brothers. Lisa Henson was, and they were all, these were all women producers, very powerful, but I liked them all. I mean, I really liked interacting with them in whatever capacity. And so it was pretty cool to see that Ann Sarnoff did become the chairperson and the CEO of Warner Brothers. Now, she's very interesting from her background. And like Kevin Tsujihara had come out of amusements like running parks and things. But Ann Sarnoff first worked at Viacom. She worked at Viacom in corporate development. Then she was the head of Nickelodeon Consumer Products. And while she was working at Nickelodeon, she created she was part of the team that created Noggin, the TV channel Noggin. And she helped create the channel TV Land, which started out as Nick at Night's TV Land. I'm reading all this. I took this information from Wikipedia. But she helped launch VH1 Classic. She also, which is pretty amazing, she was the chief operating officer of BBC Worldwide North America. She also was the chief operating officer of the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association. And then in 2019, she became the first woman CEO of Warner Brothers. And it used to be Time Warner before it was bought by AT&T. And she succeeded Kevin Tsujihara, and again, Kevin Tsujihara was somebody that I had been following. And I don't know if I was I mean, this is such a weird thing to admit, but I didn't like Kevin Tsujihara's stewardship of Warner Brothers, and not just because of comic book movies. But anyway, so I'm a fan of hers. I've just been a fan of hers, and this is just one of these things like you don't talk about because what are you gonna do? Like let's talk about Ann Sarnoff, the new CEO of Warner. Like who's gonna care? Like so, it's not like you can have a conversation. This is just like personal things, being a geek about the business of Hollywood. And yes, it comes out of when I was younger, being fascinated by moguls and how did Hollywood work. And it's a vestige of childhood, the same way I loved Star Trek. And, you have these little pet interests. And I've always been fascinated by people who run Hollywood. So I did not know that David Starzyk even knew her. We've never had that conversation. Why would we? And he said he'd gone to lunch with her. I'm like, wow, that's cool. That was interesting. But then today, because I haven't really, I've been very curious to hear how are CEOs managing the Hollywood moguls, the people running Hollywood. How are they managing all of this? I mean, we're talking about, my God, changing release dates and Pattinson coming up with COVID. Like, what are you doing? I've been thinking about that since yesterday. My God. What's Warner Brothers going to do? How does the insurance work? When are they going to get back to filming? How long do they have to quarantine? Do they have to quarantine the entire crew? I mean, or can you imagine hair and makeup people and costumers? I mean, you're up close and personal with somebody. Did they all get quarantined? Like, fascinating stuff. So anyway, the Hollywood Reporter today had an interview with Ann Sarnoff in it. So I'm like somebody's giving, it was almost as if somebody in the Hollywood Reporter is like, Rob Burnett has questions. Why don't we just do an interview with the CEO of Warner Brothers? And because he wants us to. That's in my mind. I'm like, well, how cool is that? Like, somebody provided me something that just in particular delighted me. And they interviewed her, and I figured her answers, while pretty brief, I'm like, it made me like her. It made me like her even more. I already had great respect for her, but I'm like, how cool is that? So I figured I would share this interview with you guys. So the first question is, we'll just read these questions and talk about them. Production on The Batman has been halted after a cast member tested positive for COVID-19. It's been confirmed the person is lead actor Robert Pattinson. She says, I won't comment on specifics. We have to protect people's privacy. Well, that means that this interview was done in the last day. And I'm like, great answer, because she's still trying to figure out what's going on and how they're gonna deal with it, because they don't know yet. This is a new thing. Love that answer. It was not a non-answer, but it was a good answer. Does what happened to The Batman change your thinking about resuming production? I think we never expected things to go smoothly. In fact, as we've been getting our protocols ready, we built in contingencies. If someone tests positive, you do contact tracing, you pause, you evaluate, you come back when you can. I think it would have been naive to think we wouldn't have certain cases on certain productions. The most important thing is to be ready for when that happens, and we were very much ready. Why do I like that answer? Because here's somebody that is on top of it, gets it. They've already done their pre-planning because of her background. The same reason that Kevin Feige, he produced 13 Marvel movies before starting the MCU. He saw what worked. He saw what didn't work. And Sarnoff has the background to understand all of this. She's coming at the industry from a holistic standpoint. She knows what corporate interests are, and she also understands production. And putting on even the WNBA. These are live events with people and places and things. And so I just liked hearing... I liked hearing these answers. Like, they knew, like they're on top of it. They probably weren't planning on their lead actor getting it, but I'm sure that was part of their protocols and everything. Do you have any sense at all of when production might return to normal on an overall basis? I don't see things material changing unless there's a medical solution, unless we were to reach herd immunity somehow. Instead, we are just proceeding as if there won't be and resuming production as safely as we can. That's right, there isn't going to be. We have yet to ever have any effective virus for any effective vaccine for any coronavirus. So clearly they know. The show must go on. We have to make movies. I mean, we are a publicly held giant corporate company. We got to make it work. We got to make it work. Now, they're not willing to compromise safety. They're on top of these things, which I think is great. And I just love these answers. Regarding Tenet's release in theaters, there's a perception that Christopher Nolan controls things. Is that fair or overstated? Well, if you've been paying attention to this community, the genre pundit community, there's been a lot of talk that Christopher Nolan somehow was in charge of distribution. Now, we all know he's got a pretty big chunk of the first dollar gross. I understand that. Christopher Nolan got to get paid. He's done some great work for Warner Brothers, and admittedly a terrific track record. He deserves all that cheddar that he's going to be clocking from Tenet, and why not? Ann's answer: it's overstated, meaning Christopher Nolan's control of things. It's overstated. Let me share with you the process that we went through. Right when COVID struck, we started looking at alternative ways to think about movie releases. On the Scoob front, we decided to release it on PVOD. Families were sequestered together and wanted more content. We're very happy with the results. A few weeks later, it debuted on HBO Max, where we were very happy with the results as well. On the Tenet front, we also had a finished movie, which we are very proud for people to see. As summer unfolded, we started thinking of more innovative ways of releasing the film. What if we didn't put everything up front toward the opening weekend? Theaters were very upfront about saying they could give us 3 to 4 times as many screens as normal, so that started to change our thinking. We are happy with where we are. Some markets still aren't open, but it is a marathon and not a sprint. Again, this kind of thinking, you've got to pivot when situations require you to do so. Tenet's opening in China and it's opening here. Apparently, the numbers in China are good. It's doing Dunkirk numbers. Not bad. Pretty exciting. Maybe not what the studio wanted, but this is new territory. And the fact that they're thinking this way, they're going to do both. They couldn't have released Tenet SVOD. I just think that there's too much money involved. Again, we've talked about it a lot on the show. How much things cost in terms of their return. Tough. And I just, again, she gets it. There's a reason why she's CEO of Warner Bros. Theaters have instituted a host of safety protocols, but are you concerned about risks of asking people to gather in an enclosed space? Of course. We have done quite a bit of research throughout the last few months about people's concerns and preferences. We started to monitor behaviors of people going back to outdoor restaurants and indoor theaters. It gave us a lot of data about specific markets and the behavior that people are likely to exhibit when theaters reopen. Our approach is to never make anyone go to a theater if they aren't comfortable. But it isn't one size fits all. Some people are more comfortable than others. Look, there's going to be a lot of people that are critical that are saying that going to a movie theater can be a super spreading event. Well, that really depends, of course, as you've heard on the John Campea show. When John Campea went to Vegas to see New Mutants, he was very impressed with the protocols that the theaters had put in place there. I think it was AMC that he went to. The protocols that AMC put in place, and he felt very safe, clean, those kinds of things. I mean, the real problem with all of this is it's other people. Someone once said, hell is other people. Well, that's true in the pandemic. You can be as careful as you want and put all the protocols, the safety protocols in place that you can, but there's always going to be some yo-yo that doesn't think they need to wear a mask or doesn't think they need to do this or that. That's going to be the problem. But in the case of a global pandemic and the fact that Warner Brothers is dealing with their lead actor, who protocols were already in place, he'd been sequestering away, he came down with COVID-19. Well, at least he was diagnosed with having it. I don't know if he's asymptomatic or not, but it shows that it can go and it can be anywhere. So we always have to be mindful and be diligent. Would you ever consider doing a hybrid PVOD release for a big tentpole, much as Disney is doing with Mulan? I don't completely understand Disney's strategy, but they are releasing Mulan internationally in some theaters. I'm rooting for anybody who's getting a movie out. Amen. Fans are anxious for new content. I actually went to see Tenet last night in Connecticut. I'm in Bedford, New York, and drove 10 minutes to the theater with friends, and it was amazing. It was safe. There were no crowds. I even found a way to eat popcorn with a mask on. Of course, my mask smells like popcorn now. Okay. The woman is CEO of Warner Brothers, and she went out to see her own movie in Connecticut. Come on. Bravo, madam. Bravo. I love that. And, of course, why did she do that? She didn't have to. She could probably have a link and watch it at home. I think she was doing her research. She was doing her due diligence. She was going out and seeing what is the actual environment out there. What are we dealing with? What do I need to know? That's what good leaders do. Hear, hear. Go, Ann. You go, girl. It was amazing. I even found ways to eat popcorn. You know, it's funny. One of the things that a little thing that I've come to enjoy during this COVID situation is we have these masks in the car, and sometimes, you know, if they're not, like, I'll admit it, we don't use a new mask every time. We've got these really nice masks in the car that Elizabeth and I use, but sometimes I put Elizabeth's mask on, and there's a little bit of her makeup in it, like on the nose, the bridge of the nose, and it smells really good. It's got this very pleasant vanilla-y smell to it. So when I put on her mask, I'm like, oh, this is kind of delightful. Anyway, I know that's just maybe too much information, but there you go. Did you ever consider putting Tenet on PVOD considering the ongoing pandemic? No. Flat out no. Love it. Love to hear this. It is a remarkable, cinematic, beautiful film. It's so impactful. It's a movie meant for the big screen. I'm very proud of our approach. A lot of people are pushing stuff into next year. Tenet absolutely deserves to be seen in theaters. There you have it. Somebody who's interested in preserving the cinematic experience and also understands, we need to recoup our $250 million. I get it. I understand. But still, I just like hearing her talk about a cinematic approach. If you make a movie, let's see it in a theater. It's nice to hear that from the top. You know, whether it's a talking point that she's been given by the publicity department, I don't think it is. Not a woman of her background and experience. She doesn't have to bullshit you. She says it like it is. I like that. What is the thinking on Wonder Woman 1984, which is due out in mid-October? Will you move it to the Dune slot in December? A question I've been asking myself because, I mean, let's face it. I want to see Wonder Woman 84, but after Tenet, the movie that really floats my boat, bites my noodle, whatever you want to call it, or moves my needle, is, of course, Dune. We're still figuring out the strategy for all of our movies. We have quite a lot done. Obviously, Wonder Woman 84 is up next. For now, it is where it is. Like I said earlier, certain movies deserve to be on the big screen. My belief is that Wonder Woman is one of these. I would take that to be pretty definitive in terms of Wonder Woman being released theatrically. But I wouldn't be surprised, depending. I mean, Tenet's going to set the tone. If Tenet, I mean, they're all in. They're all in with this strategy during this pandemic. But we will find out what's going to happen with that film, with Wonder Woman 84 and with Dune, depending on how Tenet performs. So fingers crossed that Tenet does what they want it to do. I hope so. For everyone's sake, go Warner Brothers. HBO Max's launch has been considered less optimal. Now that there's been a big reorganization, are you talking about simplifying things and changing the name? Would you consider new pricing or anything that might change the HBO Max approach? These are early days for me. Casey and I are partners in diving in since neither one of us was working on it directly before. So we're really studying the consumer feedback, the content, performance, etc., etc. The good news is we're seeing incredible engagement. Stay tuned. Again, love that answer. I mean, you could call it evasive, but there's no reason. Everybody knows that HBO Max launched during the pandemic because of the viewing numbers and the subscriptions that were there to be had when people are sequestered at home. So would they have liked to have had a more optimal launch that was more consumer friendly? Of course. But who had the time? Let's jump in now with our 2 feet. We'll jump right into the deep end, and we'll figure out how to swim later. And if I'm going to drown, someone will come help me, take me to the shallow end, and we'll figure it out. And look, for those of you who might not be paying attention, Ridley Scott's new epic science fiction series, Raised by Wolves, dropped today. Looks incredible to me. I haven't yet watched it, but I haven't even signed up for HBO Max, but I'm going to. I like the title HBO Max. I think they should stick with it. Maybe they'll change it. I don't know. But if she's going to jump in, and clearly she certainly knows how to deal with networks and setting up programming and setting up new offshoots of things, so it's not like she's not in her wheelhouse. Again, her background with VH1 and Nickelodeon, she's right there. She's done these things before. Again, that's why she is CEO of Warner Brothers. So looking forward to that. This is kind of funny. There's a lot of scuttlebutt with all the studio reorganizations, and Susan Rovner looking at NBC Universal. Can you give us any idea as to when Peter Roth might retire, or what you might do to retain someone so that they don't go to a rival? course she can't answer this question. I'm sorry, I can't comment because it's all speculation at this point. I don't have anything official to say. Of course she can't. Well, you can't talk about where people are going in terms of people that run the companies. I mean, that affects your stock price. You can't talk about those things. That one comment by her could have cost somebody millions of dollars one way or another. Go, Ann. How much creative input do you tend to have in terms of content? Now, this is very interesting. So we're always wondering, like, how much when Kevin Tsujihara was weighing in on Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and deciding perhaps we should get rid of Zack Snyder, or was he? You don't know who did what and when. Ann says, my job is to lead the group. I'm not giving notes. I may have an opinion about something. I have incredibly capable people working for me. I'm very happy with them running their businesses. That is one of the reasons that John Stanky hired me. I break silos. My job is to pull it all together and make it more valuable for creators. They now have one-stop shopping. We just have so many platforms to work with. Love that answer. My job is to pull it all together and make it more valuable for creators. I mean, she knows that what is Warner Brothers' business? To make all kinds of content over many different platforms. How do you do that? With great creators. Again, that's the kind of leadership you need in Hollywood. That makes me happy. Love to hear that. With NBC's reorganization, it seems like you come in the door and they decide where the product goes. How will Warner Brothers approach this? Let me give you an example of how this new structure simplifies things. Toby Emmerich will now focus, he's head of film. Toby Emmerich will now focus on whether a project is a theatrical release or whether it is better for HBO Max, in which case he'll talk to Casey and Sarah Aubrey. Now that everything is under one roof, it's much easier and more harmonious. And then they follow up. Will Toby decide that well into the process? It will be right out of the gate is the intention in terms of what distribution route a project will take. It will very rarely be a pivot. What she's saying there is that when you're making a movie, you're going to know going in if this is going to be a theatrical release or it's going to be a release for HBO Max direct to streaming. You're not going to find out as a filmmaker that you think you're making a theatrically released movie and then, oh, nope, we decided to put it on streaming. Look, that's going to be hugely important in terms of how people are negotiating their contracts, guild rules, all kinds of things. And knowing that up front is going to be crucial because you don't want to piss off your creatives by pivoting in the middle of a project. Again, great answer, very definitive. Love hearing that. Where is the AMPTP and the guilds in terms of return to work talks? We understand there are issues around work hours and sick day compensation. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about this on the show. How are the various unions going to work? How is that going to work? IATSE, whether it's Teamsters, SAG, all the different guilds. How is it going to happen? I'm very informed, and we have a very good team that has been negotiating. They're fairly optimistic that we're starting to reach some agreements with the unions. Again, this is a new world. Don't have an answer. Who knows? But, yeah. I mean, what are you going to do? How do you... I mean, I'm very curious, and I hope somebody writes an article about this, but just from I guess it won't matter to many people, but I'm just fascinated by the intricacies of how production actually works. So how do the guilds respond when you start up for 3 days, you're 25% into shooting the Batman, which is where they are, they started up for 3 more days, and then they have to close down again? How do the unions, are the unions going to be helpful? Are they going to play ball? Because the studios, you think Warner Brothers wants their movie to shut down? You know how much money that costs them? How does the insurance pay off on that? I don't know. I'm curious. I'd love to read an account. I'd love to see Ann come back and do an article or do a long interview or maybe with somebody and talk about the actual intricacies of how all of these are going. How are all of these things going to work with the guilds? I really want to know, not just as a producer, but as somebody who is interested being able to inform other people. I have a lot of filmmakers that are always calling me going, Rob, how does this work and how does that work? And I don't like being able to say, or I don't like when I have to say, I don't know. And people have been talking about, well, Rob, how is independent film going to work if you're going to make an independent movie in Los Angeles? Can you? I don't know. I mean, there's the protocols involved that, I mean, you look at the pages of protocols that the studios are implementing. How do you do that on an indie feature? I don't know. So does that mean independent movies, independent productions are ixnayed until whenever? Very possibly. Or do you have to, I mean, already if you're not abiding by certain rules, your independent production can get shut down and people will decide to unionize on you. And that's when there isn't an epidemic. So if you're trying to shoot an independent movie and you're not living up to protocols, I can't even imagine. On a personal level, after all these months, after Tenet finally opens and you get the news about Batman, how do you cope with such uncertainty? I think it is what I said about Tenet. You have to be patient. You have to open in markets where you can. It's the same with production. You produce when you can. I don't see it as anything that changes our strategy. And then they go on to say, you just got a new promotion and a whole new team that you have to deal with on Zoom. Well, I was able to interact with many in person before we went into lockdown. I certainly spent a lot of time with Casey and Sarah and Sandra Dewey. You definitely get Zoom fatigue. We're also trying to be creative. I'm returning to LA in a few weeks, and even if we aren't all in the office, we can do walks together or socially distanced iced teas. We will take it a step at a time. I will never take a hug for granted again. Bravo, Ann. Really liked hearing everything you had to say. I really appreciate you taking the time out of trying to keep Warner Brothers together during this crazy time. You got HBO Max launching. You've got Tenet coming out in theaters. I mean, Warner Brothers has for the end of the year. I mean, Tenet, Wonder Woman 84, and Dune are just the actual money that was spent on all three of those movies. That is a substantial investment. You're well on your way past $500 million with those movies, and that doesn't even include marketing. So an unenviable position for anybody to be in, not just filmmakers, but a newly minted studio head. Incredible. I'm pulling for you. I want to see you do a great job. I love this interview. It would be interesting, maybe. I would love to see like maybe a monthly series checking in, perhaps, with you. Put in the Hollywood Reporter. I'd like to know. So there you go. Anyway, that was what I wanted to talk about today. For those of you who came in late, that was she was hired last year, but that was an interview in today's Hollywood Reporter with Ann Sarnoff, the head, the CEO, and the chairperson, head of Warner Brothers. So Ann Sarnoff is an amazing. Did I say Sarnoff? Ann Sarnoff. Why am I saying Sarnoff? Because there's a TV producer named Sarnoff. But Ann Sarnoff. And it was great to hear from her, and I'm a big fan, and I'm hoping that all works out. And I can't wait to see Tenet. I know John Campea is going to see it today, and gosh, let's just see it. Let's happen. I just want to see Warner Brothers succeed. Tenet, Wonder Woman, Dune. I really want Dune to be a big hit so we can see more of them. So there you go. Just a thing I was thinking about on a Friday. And you know what else I'm thinking about on a Friday? I'm thinking about the letters people write to me. And boy, I've been getting a lot of them. So there you go. And I think I'm going to hit you guys up. And girls and gentle people and kind souls and however you identify from the 28 known galaxies. I've received a few letters, and I'm going to read them. This one, let's see, comes from Danny Pettit. And, yeah. So Danny says, before 1978, my world of entertainment was toys and mainly die-cast vehicles. Meccano and Lego, the pre-licensed sets before film merchandising was the norm. Me too. When I first started playing with Legos, which I loved, there were no sets. You know, I used them to build like actual, like for my Mego figures, I would use Legos to build like buildings or jails for supervillains or something. While watching old sci-fi B movies, classic Doctor Who, Blake 7, Space 1999, Thunderbirds, and Star Trek, which were all in black and white, at the time my dad refused to buy a color TV set because it meant he would have to pay the more expensive annual BBC TV license. There were two types, monochrome at $10 and color at $25, both of which were a lot of money back in the 70s. For me, though, I was none the wiser. It was simple and innocent times. Then December 1978 arrived. My dad was made redundant after working 25 years for the same company. He used most of his redundancy money to pay off the mortgage and renovate our home, but still refused to get a color TV. You know what? I might have read this letter before. I think I have, but I'm going to read it again. However, with whatever money he had, I was treated to a surprise that under normal circumstances I could only dream about. I was treated to a trip to the cinema to see Superman the movie. And like every 8-year-old child, after watching the great late Christopher Reeve fly on a giant screen and in color, I was completely blown away. My world was changed forever. Prior to that, my only other superheroes were the classic Incredible Hulk TV series and the 60s campy Batman. And while it's not my intention to berate them, well, they didn't compare to Christopher Reeve's Superman. Hell, they weren't even in the same stratosphere. After that, I grew up to appreciate other superheroes, especially the other parts of the Trinity, Wonder Woman and the darker Batman, meaning Tim Burton's Batman, the 90s Batman in the animated series, and so on. To that note, I also grew up to like other franchises, including Marvel, but not as much as DC. It's probably due to that fateful day when my superhero cinema cherry was popped back in 1978. Superman will always ultimately be my favorite superhero. Now I've come to the point of why I'm writing this letter. After all of the divisiveness over Man of Steel and Batman v Superman not being true to classic characteristics, Metropolis being pummeled in Zod's final showdown, Superman and Batman killing, etc., I'm with you, Rob. Bravo, sir. Come on over to my side. In Man of Steel, Clark just learned who he really was in one moment, and then had to save the world, not just Metropolis. In the next, before he even had a chance to let it all sink in, let alone evolve into Superman. To top it off, Clark was forced to kill General Zod before he could kill the trapped family at the end of their fight, and everyone else for that matter. Zod was so full of psychotic rage with godlike powers that he would have absolutely not stopped until he destroyed every human on the planet. As for Clark allowing Metropolis to be partly destroyed, how could he stop it? If he dragged Zod away, then the general would have just come back and used the city against Clark. He's psychotic, remember? Metropolis and the innocent lives lost were tragic casualties from a terrorist attack in the most horrific sense. Clark was a farm boy, totally inexperienced in such things. How can he outsmart an intelligent, militaristic, and apathetic mind like Zod's? He was just as innocent as those who suffered or died, and even though his accountability was part of the story arc in Batman v Superman, or more accurately, Superman's accountability by the time that first movie was released. Speaking of Batman v Superman, Batman should not kill? What the fuck? Come on. This iteration of the Caped Crusader was partly based on Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, who is older, disillusioned, and embittered for the loss of Robin, and not making a difference in the fight against crime. He killed in the graphic novel, which was declared to be one of the best storylines ever put to print, and no one complained. Above all that, he was manipulated by Lex Luthor to kill Superman, so when he finally realized that he was being played, not going to mention Save Martha, he was most likely really pissed off. With all that pent-up emotion and a time limit to save Martha, damn, I mentioned it, I'm not surprised he really went badass on Luthor's hired goons. They wouldn't have thought twice about killing you or me. To round up, I really like both of these movies and what they represent, especially in these current times. Are they perfect? Not a chance. But I enjoyed Zack Snyder's take on these characters. However, I was exasperated and confused with Justice League because it was Frankenstein away from the outline version of the previous two films. Not going into the Warner Brothers shit take on that, it's all old hat now, release the Snyder Cut. Wait, we're getting that. Hopefully for better, can't be worse, can't wait. Is Man of Steel better than Superman the movie? In my opinion, maybe in parts. Don't get me wrong. The 1978 movie is iconic for what it portrayed and achieved in the 70s without CGI and the advancement in technology. Richard Donner and Christopher Reeve convinced me that a man really could fly, which still holds up for me today. But it's also a product of its time. Just as, in the same respect, that Man of Steel is the current take on Superman. Henry Cavill is Superman? Absolutely. Let him come back to play the Man of Steel again, which I know is probably happening in some form. If Reeve was still alive and didn't suffer that tragic accident back in the 90s, then possibly let him play Jor-El or Jonathan Kent, not to belittle Russell Crowe or Kevin Costner. Another point to this letter, Rob, is that I was like you. I was hoping for a new Cavill Superman movie reveal at DC Fandom, but after the bombshell you dropped today about Ben Affleck coming back to reprise his role as Batman and the not-so-coincidental removal of the surprise announcement panel, this now does not seem likely. Do you think there will be a new Superman movie or a Man of Steel 2? Yes, I do. And if not, then he's going to play Superman in the Black Adam film. Affleck returning as Batman? Yes. Godot continuing as Wonder Woman? Absolutely. Yes, please. Cavill returning for a new Superman movie. Still hoping. It's now gone stupid o'clock. I've missed half of your live stream by trying to write this letter, so I'm going to have to rewatch it after some sleep. Live long and prosper, Rob. Be safe. P.S. Can't wait to receive my new Hot Toys 6th scale Henry Cavill Man of Steel figure with functioning heat vision. It will be going next to my Christopher Reeve Superman figure. Sweet. Danny Pettit, living in a little market town in Somerset County, 150 miles southwest of London, UK. Well, I don't think I have read this letter, but I want to thank you for this letter. What a great letter. Appreciate it. And yes, clearly you and I, sir, we park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. So, yes, there you go. So thank you for that. By the way, this episode is going to be an hour long because I am jumping over onto Nerdrotic's Friday Night Tights live stream. They have graciously extended an invitation to me. So if you can't get enough of me on this show, please jump over to Nerdrotic's Friday Night Tights. I'll be there with Az, Heel versus Babyface, and a bunch of other fine folks. And I'm sure we're going to have a rip-roaring good time. Hey, Rob, I must first tell you how honored... This comes, by the way, from James Snyder. Hey, Rob, I must first tell you how honored I am to have the image of the Archbishop of Banterbury included in the opening of Robservations. It is a true privilege. I have some thoughts about expanding that on down the road, but I would want to run some ideas by you first. What I'm sending you today is nothing more than a funny coincidence. Probably not Robcast-worthy, but I thought you might find it somewhat amusing. Like many fans of that long-ago faraway galaxy, I was not satisfied with Star Wars 9. I'm also one of those fans who re-edited The Phantom Menace, removing over a half hour, but Episode 9 was beyond editorial resurrection. So in January, I wrote a treatment and sent it to my friend who helped me re-edit Episode 1. As the attached screenshots show, I happened to share it the day before your coverage of Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates script. That my treatment outline, whatever it has a similar title, is a somewhat funky coinkydink. But Duel of the Fates has been been a well-loved Williams composition from the last century. That I made the Knights of Ren more prominent was another obvious choice a fan would make. But what really surprised me, that I also had the hijacking of a Star Destroyer. Well, a modified one, but still, I thought I was being so clever. I guess you could take that as evidence that there may be something to that theory of a universal subconscious. Shrimp, or plate of shrimp. I wouldn't blame anyone for not believing my claim, and I'm not really trying to prove anything. I just thought it was such an unlikely and specific coincidence. I assume, like all of us, you have better things to do than browse Star Wars fan fiction, but if you do find yourself with a few minutes to kill, it's a quick read, and I added a lot of stock images and a number of photobashed ones to get the point across. As always, grateful for the good thoughts and better intentions you have fostered in this Post-Geek Singularity community. Great minds think alike, and so do ours. Captain McTootie Pants. Well, this is actually called Star Wars Episode 9, The Final Duel. And I have not read it, but I definitely will look into it. He has a Star Destroyer called a Tormentor class, and I'll read what he says. The general setting is 2 to 3 years after the events of The Last Jedi. Kylo Ren rules. The First Order has become the ultimatum. A sense of oppression has taken hold of the galaxy, and Kylo's volatile temper only making it feel more perilous. The brutality of his rise to power has not gone unnoticed. Nothing like it has happened in 100 generations. It is said he rarely sleeps and talks to himself, addressing people who aren't there. So powerful, yet so unstable. Hux's military has created a new type of capital ship to use as a means to dominate. Cobbled together from existing Star Destroyers and a miniaturized Death Star tech, the Tormentor-class ships can eradicate civilizations without destroying the worlds. The central firing dish emits a beam that ossifies animal matter, leaving structures intact and ghastly statuary behind. They can also raise the surface of a planet without blowing it apart. This horrible power is demonstrated very early on in the story. So anyway, it goes on from there. I think that sounds pretty cool. I'm in. I want to thank you for writing, and again, also for your artwork. Thank you for that. Pedro Ferreira is here, or Pedro Ferreira. Ferreira? One day I'm going to get it right, Pedro. Please forgive me. I butcher these foreign names. I'm terrible. Hi, Rob. Apologies I haven't written in a while. I've been having some problems at home, which I will be getting to shortly. Firstly, I'd like to say I originally got excited when Warner Brothers announced in the UK was getting a box set of the Neverending Story 1 and 2. The first is nothing new, but the sequel has never had a digital release before. I have a lot of good things to say about the sequel, which I have always found to be underrated, if flawed. It certainly is a better film than the third one, anyway. I didn't even know there was a Neverending Story 3. Unfortunately, for some strange reason, Warner Brothers have limited the two-film release to just DVD, meaning the sequel still hasn't had an HD release in the UK. At the rate they're taking their time getting the sequel out on digital formats, I should only need to wait until the year 2029 for the Blu-ray release. When I checked Amazon for the artwork, I noticed something quite amusing. The back cover lists George Miller as the director of the next chapter, but lists his credits as films like Mad Max and Happy Feet. Wrong George Miller. The Miller's credits they needed to list is the man from Snowy River. Not sure why I emailed Warner's to tell them this mistake, because it frankly looks embarrassing. They thanked me for noticing the mistake, acknowledging that it was too late to make adjustments, while also giving me the bad news they have no intention at present to give the next chapter a Blu-ray release. I shouldn't have bothered, but I thought since I'm a connoisseur, I'd mention it here. You should always bother. By God, yes, you should. And good for you for doing so. So what has been happening with me? Well, I guess anxiety issues have taken their toll on me, because now I have a stomach issue as well as nonstop itching. I think it has something to do with oversensitive nerves in my body. It's nothing to do with a rash. It's very much neurological, although due to my hypochondria, I'm investigating anything else it could be. It was getting so bad I was starting to suffer heightened anxiety issues. Things came to a head one Sunday night. I was playing a casual game called Free the Witch. My OCD requires me to finish this damn game, and I noticed that the existing cracks in my bedroom ceiling were getting really bad. Over the past few years, builders upstairs had started the cracks, and then the builders next door drilling and made the cracks worse. I told my parent, who suggested I sleep in another room just to be on the safe side. I agreed, but decided to read a bit before going to bed next door. I put the casual game off and lay on the bed reading my video game magazine, and after a while I left my room to go to sleep in the other room. 5 minutes after turning the lights off, the entire middle of the ceiling in my bedroom finally collapsed, spraying heavy chunks of ceiling debris in every direction, not just in the path of the collapse. My chair was covered in debris, and the whole room was covered in dust. My trusty keyboard got battered, and the homemade portable fan my dad made for me got destroyed. It looked like a war zone. Man, you are lucky you got out. Clearly you have some kind of intuition. I hope you always follow it. It looked like a war zone afterwards. In fact, it looked like the scene from the end of Star Trek Generations, where Picard and Riker are talking about time stalking people. Time is the fire in which we burn. I plan to live forever as well, Will. Had I still been at my computer playing some mediocre match 3 game or been sleeping in my bed, I would have been injured, at least covered in dust. What an embarrassing way it would have been to go. At my funeral, the gathered people would have said, well, he liked talking about films, and obviously he loved Free the Witch, as he played it right to his death. Bullshit. Everyone out there, live your lives to the fullest. Don't end up dying because you played a crappy Match 3 game called Free the Frickin' Witch. As I was already having anxiety symptoms, unsurprisingly, this gave me palpitations, so that took days to recover from. Hey, at least my stomach problems weren't too bad for a few days. You'll be happy to know 0 films and TV were harmed during the collapse. Builders fitted a new ceiling, a thinner but stronger one, pretty quickly, but now I feel slightly weird in my room, even though I know in my mind the ceiling is new and there isn't a crack in sight. I had no idea I could bring the house, or at least my room, down. Keep everyone safe, Pedro. Well, what a great letter, Pedro. You know, I would look at it this way. When I was in Australia and I got jumped by 4 dudes, and they did some work, they tuned me up, I would say that there was a certain calm and a serenity that came over me after that, because I figured, it's happened once. How in your life, how often are you ever going to get jumped by 4 dudes who crack your ribs and break your nose? So I figured, okay, that's already happened to me. So then I can put that aside. So I would say that how many people in their lifetimes are in their bedrooms when the ceiling collapses? And I should say that rather than think about your anxiety, I would think about the fact that it's probably never going to happen to you again. So that's one less thing that's going to happen to you. So there is a silver lining, and it wasn't really a cloud that fell on you. It was, I guess, part of the your ceiling, but someone else's floor. So depending on how you look at it, I think ultimately you can take solace in the fact that there's less to worry about in your life. At least that's what I would tell myself. So what a great letter. Thanks for writing in, and thank you for the mirth-filled account. I think you put a smile on everyone's face with that one. Let me jump in and see what people have to say here. Willow is here. Willow says, would you happen to have any videos of Would you happen to have any videos of yourself from your jazz dance days? Should people start release the jazz dance videos? I do not. I do not have videos from my jazz dancing days. For those of you who might be wondering, what is Willow talking about? Yes, for a year I did take a jazz dancing course from at a place on Mercer Island, my hometown, Camille Chrysler's dance studio. I did. And I was like the only guy in the class, and it was really before my sexuality was not being questioned. And yeah, I wouldn't have cared if it was, but I'm not going to lie. Being in a room full of girls with tights and tutus and mimis or whatever, muumuus or whatever, it was not a bad thing. And since I was the only guy, my dance partners were always girls. But I didn't do it for that. I really was interested in learning how to dance. I've always wanted to learn to tango. I never have. But it's something, there are a couple things in life, like learning to tango and be like a great tango dancer. And we're talking not just Son of a Woman tango. I'm talking about Carlos Saura. If you guys have never seen a Carlos Saura movie, you got to see a Carlos Saura movie. It's dance movies. I mean, I want to learn to tango, man. I would love that. Like, Never Say Never Again. Sean Connery and Kim Basinger. That's why I was doing it. So no Willow, no video of me dancing. I apologize. Anonymous Inside Sources says, can you guess what Joe Haydn's favorite music album is? I cannot. Anonymous Inside Sources goes on to say, it is Smells Like Children by Marilyn Manson. Haydn told us that he's going to put y'all back in chains via his millions of violent rioters. All right, I see what you're saying. I get it. I understand. Okay. I think you meant Joe Biden. Not Joe Haydn, or unless that's some kind of a, Joe Haydn is like hiding from something. Yeah, I'm all about political jokes from all sides of the aisle. I just wish the joke we've been enduring for the last 4 years it ends. I'm willing to listen to new jokes. I am, and that's kind of funny. But Haydn, see, I was like, I just go by what you're saying. Joe Haydn, you meant Joe Biden, obviously. Jordy Lyon sends in a super chat and says, thoughts on theatrical windows and collective bargaining if films need 2 months to make the money of one. Do you see the landscape? Token of my support. Well, thanks, Jordy. How are you? Hope you're well. Look, I think it's people want to see movies, and if it takes 2 months to get that box office that you would normally get in one, I say I'm all for it. Everybody, look, it's not like everybody hasn't been affected by this in some way, shape, or form. I feel like our entire economy, we're a grand sailing ship that's now run ashore, and we hit the rocks, and we're waiting to ever be seaworthy again. Who knows if we ever will be? So people have to step up. They've got to step up, and they have to they've got to bite that bullet, and everybody's got to do their part. John Suntress and I from the Word Balloon podcast, we had an epic talk, like 5 hours the other night. It was fantastic. So if you haven't watched the Word Balloon podcast, which is now the Word Balloon video vlog, it's great. John's been killing it with the guests, and you can watch me wax rhapsodic about any number of issues for 5 hours. To me, that is nightmarish. But if you guys would like to jump in, you should, because John and I always have a good time. John says, I remember 10 years ago having an off-the-record chat with a DCU exec about why more DC animation wasn't on the Cartoon Network. He described Warner's as being independent silos as opposed to the Disney model of all platforms helping each other out. Well, I mean, I think Ann Sarnoff was saying today that they are helping each other out. But yes, I think that silos, what corporate speak, right? But again, you are not wrong. But I'm happy about that. Look, I think nowadays corporate synergy, and I don't mean that as a team building exercise. I mean, when you have, say, characters that are being exploited across multiple platforms, video games, animation, publishing, movies, how those characters are handled across those various platforms should work synergistically to promote one another. Again, you have to have a visionary at the top that understands that, or at least somebody who's managing those characters who understands what to do with them. I think this is really important. And I think a lot of the time we don't have that kind of synergy. because we don't have people that have those backgrounds. Ann has that background. Ann, like I know her. I should say Miss Sarnoff. So, there you go. Yes. So, John, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Danny Boy sent a super chat and says, "Hi, Rob. Do you have, you've read my letter before, Robservations episode 494, laugh out loud. Nice to hear it again." I thought so. You also read my second letter yesterday. I did read that. Thanks, Danny. You know, sometimes letters just come in through the transom and things get... And you know what? I don't necessarily know when I start reading them again. That was a good letter, though. I think I did a better job reading it the second time than I did the first time. So, Danny, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. I've got time to do one more letter, and then I've got to jump out. And I'm going over to, oh, my God, Bob Connolly is here. Let's hope. I hope this seems like a good letter. Hi, Rob. 1 year ago today, I had the great pleasure to go see Joan Jett and the Blackhearts perform at the Tacoma Dome. Man, I saw Bowie in the Tacoma Dome. I saw him on the Glass Spider Tour, and I saw Springsteen play for 4 hours at the Tacoma Dome when I was in high school. While it's certainly a great memory of a world that sadly doesn't exist right now, it's not 2019 that I want to travel back to, but 1982. I was born in 82. What a great year for film. And the week I was born, Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll was the #1 song in the country, and my favorite baseball player of all time, Cal Ripken, hit his first home run at the beginning of his rookie year. You know why that happened? Because that was the year you were born. They knew you were coming. I Love Rock and Roll got released, and Cal Ripken knew, Bob, that you were born and wanted to do it just for you. 82 is also widely considered to be the greatest year in the history of sci-fi movies. We all know the list by now. Blade Runner, Tron, E.T., The Thing, Poltergeist, Conan, and my personal favorite of the bunch, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Beyond sci-fi, there was the American release of probably the greatest war movie ever made, Das Boot, and the aptly titled My Favorite Year, starring my favorite actor of all time, Peter O'Toole. I'm not an actor, I'm a movie star. And co-starring Joseph Bologna, co-writer and co-star of Tango Shalom, produced and edited by me. It's funny that given how much nostalgia so many people seem to have for the 80s, that part of the decade that I find the most interesting is the first half of it, which I, of course, have no memory of. I suppose not remembering it is why I would want to go back for a visit if I could. It would be so interesting and such a blast to live through a summer where week after week another great science fiction movie was released. The fact that I Love Rock and Roll was the #1 song in America also suggests that the general public had significantly better taste in music than it does now. I don't know what happened there, but it's gone way downhill in the decades since. Sometimes I wish I could have been born 10 years earlier. I would have been just the right age to see the original Star Wars trilogy, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Ghostbusters, amongst other things in the theater for the first time. I saw them all, not to make you jealous. I also would have actually been old enough to enjoy seeing the Orioles win the World Series in 1983. As it is, I've been waiting my whole life as a fan to see them get back there. It's funny because you would think that being born in 82 would make me nostalgic for the pop culture of the 1990s, and while there are plenty of things that I love from that decade, it's not really the same. I have no desire to return to that time. Does anyone? But if Rufus or Doc Brown ever show up at my doorstep, I know the first year I'd want to visit. If anyone else from the Post-Geek Singularity wants to join me, I'll be going to an opening day double feature of Blade Runner and The Thing. In my case, one was in Seattle and one was in Bellevue, so I couldn't. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this short episode of Robservations is coming to an end right now. I am jumping off, and I'm going over to Gary Beekler to Nerdrotics. A great epic live stream. Join us over there. I want to say thanks to my moderators. Let's see who's here today. Joshua Levesque is here. Robert Pariso is here. The Richard is here. And I want to thank you guys. For those of you who don't know, tomorrow we're doing the show at noon, and then we're having a 3-hour Zoom party, and you'll be able to get that link on the show tomorrow. You're all welcome to the Zoom party. Bring your favorite alcoholic beverage. We're just going to talk and chat and shoot the shit, have an imagination connoisseur meeting of the minds. Yes, indeed. Also, I'm hoping to do Whining About Movies tonight, maybe a romantic movie that I don't even know what it is, so tune in. And if we do it, we're doing it at 8 o'clock tonight, so look out for that. Don't know if it's going to happen, but we shall see. That's Whining About Movies episode number... I think it's episode 71 tonight, but maybe so. Anyway, thanks for being here. Thank you to my moderators. Thanks for all the support of the channel. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, the end of Robservations episode number 504. Be seeing you. Yes. Hopefully I'll see you in the next stream.